2000s for sure. And Ian's here this time. How exciting! Welcome, guys. How can you miss this guy? Yes. Okay, friends. Aliens has been out for what, 37 years?
But who's counting?
Why do you think people have connected so strongly with this movie specifically, but the franchise in general?
I think the first one, Alien, Geiger, the artwork, established the genre, and Cameron grabbed it and just took it to a whole other level. And reinvented a whole new genre. I think it's Ridley Scott and Jim Cameron, both. That's my 2 cents.
I think it's kind of a relatable movie, though, too. Like, I get a lot of people talking to me about, like, they joined the Marines because of that, or they watched it before they were deployed somewhere, and I think it's kind of relatable, but also the special effects are so good, especially for the 80s, and I think that it just kind of resonates with people, and it's one of those movies that people share with their kids, and then their kids, and it just kind of, and then it becomes a bond that they have with someone.
I think there are a couple of other facets, one of which is that I think it was just about the first movie where women were kicking the ass. And it was the last movie where everything you see on the screen existed in real life. You know, all of the encrusted walls that the aliens emerged from, that was all physically there on the set. You open a drawer in the operations lab, and there's a shopping list from the PX on the colony. I mean, it's unbelievable what that art department did. And it looks real, and we were real, and that holds true through the generations, well past CGI.
Another one, the film was a relationship between mothers and daughters. It was in there, you know, and that's including the Queen and all of her children as well. And that was a sort of a theme through it. And the other thing that was interesting is someday people asked me, what's your favorite scene? I always enjoyed the waking up, breakfast, getting together. And there was so much time was spent, an unusual time was spent with all of us and no action, but building a relationship, and you really got to know these people and all that. So when they finally, died, and you were with them, and it really meant something to the audience. I hope it did.
I think that, previous to that, in the consciousness of the world, we were thinking 2001, where everything was just like clean and antiseptic and stuff. And then we have Aliens, where you have a junkie in space, where Yaphet Kotto is burping and farting, and Harry Dean Stanton is an astronaut, which is so weird. And then, it's just, that's fantastic, but it's weird. And then he adds, to this one, he adds the element of a child and a family aspect to it. And it's an extension of that, but also James Cameron is so good at tension and creating it into a horror film too, and that he achieved that on the highest level.
It's also not that frequent that you get a spectrum of characters that are all completely different, fully formed people. And anytime anybody walks on the stage, you can plug into another story. That's not that you care for all the characters as much as each other. It's not very often that happens. Cameron.
Come on, stop being modest.
Yeah.
Space Marines.
That's right.
Marines in space. And a flying gun. The spaceships are flying gun. You're carrying awesome guns and Space Marines in space. Fuck yeah.
And just to say, the advantage of being older and being able to look back is to know that the atmosphere that we created, or Jim created for the world, and we had the pleasure of being around. You saw ultimate craftsmen. All the crew at Pinewood Studios did things that they don't do anymore. It's all computer generated. It's beautifully done often, but and that technology won't stop. it was a real movie of craft, and Jim crafted it beautifully.
What they said?
No, because you were tired.
No, I think honestly what they said, but also one thing I didn't hear was the diversity of the cast. And this was, a long time ago, and they had, I think everybody that went to the movie, they saw Americans up there. They saw relationships, and it was like the United Nations. And even who knows if Vasquez is gay or straight or what, do we? But it was just like it had everything in that movie, and so I think that the casting of it was part of the brilliance.
The Jewish smug player.
And we must give a great big welcome to newcomer to Days of the Dead, Carrie's brother. Please, everyone. I appreciate that you're here. How was it like working together?
I would say it's a lot like being at home. She was able to hit me with a doll and not get in trouble. So I think from her aspect, it was pretty good. For me, it was pretty good too, because being on the set was an incredible experience. It kind of took some of the mystery away of the movie making, because you got to see how it was done. But like everyone said, the fact that everything was real, it was pretty amazing experience.
And you guys were also very, very young. I'll leave that as well, sorry. You guys are also young, but how did this fall into your lap? How did you get this job?
So mine was completely random and really kind of weird for nowadays, but I was eating lunch in my school cafeteria, and normally I actually would go home for lunch because we could. And I was living in England at an Air Force base. And so I didn't go home for lunch that day because my mom was going to be gone, so I happened to be eating lunch in the school cafeteria. They came around taking pictures of all the little girls, which now is kind of creepy to think. But it was the 80s, I didn't think anything of it. I never even actually mentioned it to my family when I got home. And a couple days later, my dad said, because the school nurse was working with him and my dad was a medic at the hospital. And so she's like, kind of explained what had happened, that there were some people and they were really interested in me. And so my dad said, hey, did someone take your picture? And I was like, oh yeah, and again, I didn't really think too much of it. And he kind of explained to me, he's like, well, they might be calling, and would you like to try out for a movie? And I was like, well, sure, I've never done that before, so why not? So we tried out and just kind of kept, they had a lot of auditions at the school, and my mom would come, obviously, with myself and my brother, and I seem to read a lot of the parts from the Jordan family. And so they would just say, well, can your brother just come in and read for Timmy, just to make it a little bit easier. And then after they offered several auditions later, and then they flew Sigourney over, which I was super impressed back then, because she flew over on the Concorde, and I was like, whoa. I don't know what I was more impressed by. She was in Ghostbusters or the Concorde. So I went in, obviously, and I was like, can I please have your autograph? And they thought it was funny, because by then they pretty much knew that they were going to have me do it. And then they called back shortly after and said that I had the part, and then they said, and would Chris like to go ahead and be her brother? So it worked out really well. And it was awesome for me filming with my brother, because my mom was on set. I could see her from where I was at, and I was being told to hit my brother as hard as I could. She couldn't get mad at me, and I was being paid for it. I mean, what more could a little girl ask for, right?
And so this fell into your lap. Did you have any interest in acting, both of you, before this happened? No?
Not before.
Right.
No, yeah, it happened. It was an amazing experience. It's something I contemplated doing when I was younger, but my heart was always, I wanted to be a teacher, so I decided to go, since I was a little girl, so.
Yeah, which one is the choice?
What?
Which one is the choice of profession?
Sometimes that's questionable, but yes.
Yeah, no, I think it was just kind of a fluke thing that we had no, I mean, I don't think we had any clue what we were getting into.
We had no
I mean, now, 37 years later, it's mind blowing.
You're gonna be sitting here on stage with your sister going, whoa.
Well, I remember going to a screening. I was pregnant with my daughter, and Jeanette was there. And she's like, "Have you gone to conventions?" I was like, "What's that?" And she's like, "Wait, you haven't gone to any?" And I said, "No, I don't even know what that is." She's like, "Carrie, you've got to go to some of these things. It's pretty cool." And then shortly after that, I was invited to my first one. So, I mean, I had no real clue even how big Aliens was because I don't live in LA. I have my own life. This is like my secret hidden life that, I mean, people know about, but it's not something that it doesn't define me. It's part of me, but,
Do we have any audience questions? Yes, first you and then you.
I love Xenomorph Girl. How was you got any stories for Sigourney Weaver or any of the good cast? How was it like to work in that?
I would like working with Sigourney.
And with Sigourney? Yeah. Was it both or was
No,
just Sigourney?
How was it working with which of the actors have good stories to share? And Detroit is
What's there?
Well, I worked very closely with a xenomorph because he grabbed me and took me straight up in the air. And you talk about old school. This is about the most, not even a harness. This is the most basic stunt I've ever heard of in my life. It was a giant seesaw. Gigantic seesaw with one end about 6 feet off the ground. And my blocking instructions were to land, and mind you, I'm carrying a live flamethrower with me, which Rico knows all about intimately. And I had to land on the bottom of the seesaw immediately after the stuntman lands behind me and grabs me. And at that time, crew members start pulling down on the high end of the seesaw very quickly. So we're on one level and the angle changes immediately. At that time, I'm being grabbed, my angle is changing, and I have to lower my flamethrower, live flamethrower, and fire it. And about the first 3 or 4 times I fell off. And I was terrified because like tick, time is really money on this set because they ran a tight budget and I was really frightened and I had to make it work. And people would say, were you frightened when you were grabbed by the alien? And I say, the stuntman is like cracking jokes in my ear. No, I wasn't frightened of him. I was frightened of Jim Cameron. And I wanted to do the second half of the stunt, which was the going up. That's when you would get the harness and you go straight up in the air. I really wanted to do that. And they didn't have the insurance for it, so it was a stunt woman. Much smaller than I am, actually, but they only shoot her from underneath, and then I went in and did the scream.
So, like, a lot of people always think like the xenomorph maybe scared me a little bit when we were in the water. But what people don't know is like, so the first assistant director was worried that the water would get too cold for me, so they actually paid someone to stay overnight to make sure it stayed warm. But the problem he had is it was actually too warm. And so I was really excited about doing that scene, but not for all the obvious. You know how like they give you like those like foil blankets? I was super excited to get a foil blanket afterwards. So the alien and I were in there, but it would get so hot and I would get really flushed. So on the side there were bars. So often and there's a picture of me somewhere, and the alien and I are sitting next to each other. He's got his head off, and we're both drinking a cup of tea, like kicking our feet and doing all that kind of fun stuff. So like that stuff would happen, and then you got to get in there and be scared of them. But it's like your friend who you were just like, I mean, I think at one point we were like holding onto the side and pretending like we were swimming and that. So it sometimes was kind of difficult, even like with the Queen. 10 minutes before we took the shot, your friends are like hanging out of the Queen, and it's like it's hard to be scared of something when you know kind of what's going on. I think
You're the only person who was warm on that set, by the way. It was freezing cold, and they had to keep coming, putting this gel on our face to make us look like we're sweating.
I'm glad I was born then.
Well, the scene with when we first deploy on the planet, where it's pouring with rain, and talking about the space blankets, the silver blankets, it was really hideously cold, and we did take after take, and you have to, the words were like cue rain, and it starts pouring on you, and then cue wind, and these giant things start. And you have to run and do your business and stuff. And then in between takes, we were like, and they came and they wrapped us in those space blankets, and I called it the day of the giant baked potatoes.
We're so excited for her.
I got to use that blanket twice, I like to say, because I used it in the med lab as well. So.
And the one right next to you, yeah.
Like we said before, the characters are so unique between everyone. I can see photos of the cast and the characters, and I'm just like, I know exactly what, that part is a great experience for me. And then I showed it to him ago. One of my favorite quotes, and I still quote it to this day, is, "Guess you didn't like the already."
No crying until the end, guys.
Bill Paxton and I did a couple movies together. We did another movie called Slipstream. But no, Bill was interesting because Bill he seems to be very at home in his skin no matter where he is or who he's speaking with. And he also had this ability to make you feel special. And I guess because he's from Texas, he had all these sayings that would just like crack this Chicago boy up. He would just say shit, and it made complete sense what he was saying. He could be talking about, he could maybe talking about a cow or something. And he just say something. I know exactly what he means, and it was just the Bill-isms. And I remember on set that there was a time when he would often be to the side working this big monologue he had to do in the drop scene. And I remember listening to it and thinking, I don't know if he's gonna make this work. I don't know if this is gonna work. And the movie came out, and I thought he stole the show with that fucking monologue. And it just goes to show that you just don't know until you put all the pieces together. The music, the lighting, all the teamwork, and all of a sudden magic happened. So it was great work with Bill. And even after the movie, he and I, we really had a nice relationship.
Yeah, Bill was certainly the most generous, enthusiastic, engaging kind of person you'd ever meet, honestly. Most in Hollywood, they say Tom Hanks is most loved, but it was really Paxton. He was just the most generous soul. And two hysterical words. I mean, my God, there's so many stories we'd like to tell. Some of which he'd probably prefer we didn't. But really, a real gentleman, just a lot.
I always tell people like this is my first movie, and I was totally freaked out. Walking into Pinewood, it's just crazy. And then, just trying to hold it together. So I get to the first thing I ever did was the cafeteria scene, and from a distance, I walked to it and I'm freaked out. And Bill Paxton goes, "Hey everybody, Danny Cash is in the house!" I was like, "You are the greatest person I've ever met." I've never met him before. And I always remember that. I think it was the greatest gesture for him to do that. It made me so comfortable with the whole thing.
I have like kind of a different side. So Bill Paxton was more like my big brother on the set. And because he was on the set a lot longer than some other people. So I was trying to think of a nice way to say that. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. But I was sad when everyone started leaving because Sigourney and I used to joke and say we were the orphans nobody wanted. Because everybody was leaving and we were like, well, we're still here. But so he was like a big brother to me, and on set I had a table, and at the table I had art supplies and different kinds of things. And at Christmas time I was upset because nobody decorated, so I made a paper chain and all these different things. But Bill Paxton would come over and sit with me, and he would color, and he would play with the clay with me, and he would make a paper chain with me. It was just kind of like the big brother, you know, and like kind of taking care of me and everything. And even as we got older, obviously it'd been a long time since I had seen him, and we went to Calgary. We had a big reunion there, and someone said, "Oh, Bill Paxton's here," and so I ran over to say hi, and I went around the back, and he just kind of like looked at me and smiled and said, "Oh, hi," like kind of thinking, "Why is this person here?" And everyone who was in line obviously realized who we both were. They were taking pictures, and suddenly he like stopped what he was doing, and he looked at me again. He's like, "Wait, you're Carrie?" And I said, "I am." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, guys, this is Carrie." We're like, "Yeah, I know." And so that was kind of the first time we'd seen each other in a really long time. And then we all went out to a dinner that night, and Bill was telling me, he's like, "Hey, so you need to call the restaurant, Carrie, and tell them to hold it, because we want them to hold it for after our panel, because they close like right around the time the panel is finished." And I looked at him, I said, "You want me to call and ask them to hold it?" And he's like, "Yeah." I go, dude, "Hi, this is Carrie Henn, can you please hold it?" They're like, "I don't know who you are." Or, "Hi, this is Bill Paxton, can you please hold it?" And he's like, "Okay, I got you." And so he ended up calling, but like, even for me, sometimes I was sitting there, I'm like, "Oh, this is my buddy Hudson." And then I'm like, "Oh my God, this is Bill Paxton." Like, he's just amazing as an actor. So I kind of had a different experience, I think, probably just because of my age.
Working with Billy, the one thing I wanted to say, I did a film with him and Michael called Lords of Discipline. We were all West Point guys together. And we got to know each other, and the quality that Billy had, which is just inherent in who he is everyman. And that he was always himself, whatever the situation is. But in theater and in movies, I think you get really successful when it becomes ensemble. Everybody's doing their job, their own job as best they can, and the film has that chemistry. And Billy was always a huge glue when you worked with him, because he was always just fun to be around, amazing heart, and he took everybody just for who they were. That's why he's so known in LA.
Can I tell you a really cool story about Bill that he was telling me last time I saw him? He was actually at JFK's last, did he tell you guys that? Yeah, he was at his last speech, yeah. And if you like Google and see a picture from JFK, there's a few pictures from JFK's point of view, and you see two boys sitting on shoulders, and it was him and his cousin. So he and I had some really cool discussions about that, and he had a lot to do with the museum that they have. He bought different things and donated it, so it was pretty cool. I mean, that's.
And Bill was an avid modern art collector. This was his passion. His children were his real passion. But speaking of others who are missed, like Al Matthews. I mean, talk about real deal energy for a crew of Marines, and tremendous character, amazingly complex, bona fide, Green Beret, served in Vietnam, but interesting journey that Al took. He does this great movie, he has a huge role, and he disappears to Spain.
Is that where he was?
Yeah, and then he retired and died there. But he was a real deal lovely guy.
I would just like to say that we often don't talk about Al, and sometimes I wonder if he gets the true credit for what he brought to the film, because Al, as Mark said, was the real deal, and having the real deal around you, it changed all of us. It showed us the level of what we're talking about, and I think besides having us do a little boot camp before we started filming, I think having Al on set really kind of gave us the authenticity that we needed for that project.
It wasn't only Al, we also had a member of the Royal SAS, as he was one of the stuntmen who had a non-speaking role, because the two British stuntmen who were suited up and part of our number couldn't get the American accent right, so they're non-speaking people, but they were both wonderful people, and they're both no longer with us. But Tipping and Al, between the two of them, just kicked our butts. They spared no quarter, they were mean, they beat us up to do it right, and we're so thankful for it.
Trevor Stedman as well.
Right. Al never did these cons, but I'm sure this is one story he might have told if he did. He was, after he got out of the Army, he was shell-shocked. And it was difficult because sometimes it ended up ruining his marriage because sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be choking his wife. Crazy stuff. And he said they were going to church, and this was the final straw. And he said they were going to church, and she was dressed up really nicely, and he was dressed, and a truck backfired. And he threw her on the ground and jumped on top of her to try and save her. Because this is the kind of guy that they brought to set for us to look at and see and hear the stories that give us that authenticity of being a real Marine, and some of the after effects of it. So we had a really good relationship. It was definitely like a big brother relationship on set. And because of him, I ended up going into real estate because he told me, if I were you and I was your age, and I know what I know now, I would take the money from this film, go into the best neighborhood I could find, and buy the biggest property I could find. And that was Big Brother talk on set.
I want to direct this over to Ian. So Ian is part of the franchise, but in other segments of it, as a professional monster. And I would love to know what are some of the challenges of getting in prosthetics, makeup, and portraying all these amazing characters that scare us to death.
Yeah, thanks. I feel kind of young in terms of franchise history because AVP is only 20 years old this year. Challenges about being a monster. The greatest challenge is, realizing that the makeup, the costume, the mask, whatever it is, isn't going to act on its own. It comes from you. Playing a monster is so much playing a human being. It comes from you, so you've got to connect with it. And a lot of the time, you really don't know what's going to work, how it's going to work, until you're in it completely. And it starts to make sense, then you feel it from the inside. I never think of monsters as monsters. They're characters. They have their own existence. They have their own lives that they're living. I never refer to the Predator as a monster. He was, he was walking, he was a warrior. So you've got to build a life for this character. Not just a character that doesn't exist, but a character that can't possibly exist ever. You've got to make it up.
So in your process, in your acting process of developing these characters, how important is costume and makeup, or do you pretty much kind of know what this character is, like you said, in its heart, before you put that on?
It all starts with the costume, because it all starts with, everything starts with the written word, the script, but then the designers design these characters, and design over the years, over the last 20 years. A lot of these designers have become very good friends of mine. And then you look at these characters and they build costumes and you go in, so you fit for the costume, and you look at yourself in the mirror and then you start to play with it and see where maybe somewhere you don't want to go, at least you try. And eventually the magic will start to come.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is the kind of question I would ask them backstage, but since you guys are all here, might as well. As an actor, if I ever have to play the villain, I make sure I find justifiable reasons why the villain's doing what he's doing. And as a villain, I feel that my justification is just as important as the hero's is for what he wants to do.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering, as a monster, do you justify all the actions that you take?
Absolutely. Villains don't want to be villains.
Right.
Villainy comes from a much deeper psychological complex. So I've got to find that psychological complex. And I will go insane trying to think of how an alien thinks. So I humanize it. I try and, I don't make it cookie cutter, and I try and anchor it in a human world. The predator, he's carrying weapons. The obvious thing is he's a warrior, so that's what's on the surface. So now I've got to go deeper. Now I go back and try and figure out why he's a warrior and what kind of life he's lived, the training, the sacrifice, the pain, the suffering, all of these things, and that develops the complex.
The fear of losing.
Yeah. Fear of failure, which ultimately is death.
I played this thing on Star Trek Discovery where I had to wear prosthetics for the whole thing. And the one thing I wanted to do was something that I've never seen anyone do. I picked my nose, and I went like this with my eyes, and it was like... because I've never seen anyone scratch their skin or so I made a point.
It's called hogging the show.
You broke it.
Actually, Ian, I'd like to know if you had any dance or movement training, because one thing I noticed about the aliens is they moved in a sinuous way, you know, and that doesn't come out of nothing usually.
No, exactly. You know, you take what you've got and you try and build a performance from what you know. I'm not going to make a character be a dancer if I don't want to dance. I'm going to use what I might know as much as.
Also, talk about somebody who's not here.
There
Hang on a second. Is Lance Henriksen's performance as Bishop? Lance is one of the actors who dives very, very deep. And then you believe he was an android. Totally. Extraordinary.
I got a few things. Like, I do agree that, like, I think I'm 44 now, but me joining the army, I think, was from like movies like Rambo, Aliens, and things like that. Like, there's no doubt that was a big premise of why I joined.
By the way, James Cameron co-wrote Rambo.
It's fine.
I just say thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Thank you. Honestly, like, I think the biggest thing for me is like the art side, the H.R. Geiger side. Like, did any of you guys have an opportunity of like just kind of picking his brain, or just like, were you familiar with his artwork prior or after?
If you went into the production office, into Jim's office, there were incredible drawings surrounding the room where he took Giger's initial drawings and expanded upon them. Jim is a fabulous draftsman on his own, and it just knocked us sideways. I have to say I was not familiar with him before.
And I can safely say I had no clue who it was at the time.
I was just curious, after 37 years of this film being out, what are some of the fondest and favorite memories that you have of each other or of the movie that you can share with us?
Well, pretty much every time we see each other, to be honest. We're oddly a tight-knit group, and it's genuine. For all of our faults and foibles, still put up with us. Anything except we not read.
Speaking of Paxton, we had a lovely dinner with him at the 30th reunion in Houston at Comic Palooza. It was huge, and we went to dinner with him one night, and then the following night we went to dinner with the cast of The Walking Dead. And at our end of the table, we were next to, you know, a couple, we were kind of all spread around. And the guy next to me from The Walking Dead was listening to us speak with each other, and he said, "I am so envious of you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "All of you have such a cohesiveness, and so, you have so much to talk about. You're all doing other things, you're interested in other things, and your conversations are so incredible. And I'm really tired of going out with 40-year-old guys who are chasing skirts and getting drunk." I hope I'm not telling tales out of school here, but that's what he said.
I have to say, like, I mean, obviously it was the only movie I've ever been in, and I assumed that this was kind of the relationship that you always have on set. Like, I didn't realize that it was not normal, and it's, well, maybe that normal isn't quite the right word, but then someone was talking to me once, and I said, wait, I think it was actually Sporty and I were talking, she's like, no, this isn't how it normally is on set. It's like you get close to people, but not usually everyone, and I think that could be part of why Aliens too, like, we genuinely like each other, you know, like it's, whenever I look and I see him coming to a con and there's a lot of us, I'm like, yes, all right, cool, lots of people to talk to, and I mean, like, Cynthia has her Christmas party every year, you know, they'll ask, Rico always asks me about my kids, I mean, like, we genuinely care about each and every one up here, and it's not fake what you see on there, like, I mean, it's like a family reunion.
I also think it's part of it is because of you guys. Because we've done a lot of films, all of us have done a lot of films, but you give us a reason to come back. I usually say, somebody do that. But you give us the reason to come and gather a number of times a year and have the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to watch Carrie's children grow up. You know, that's how long it's been. And Mark and I are like two brothers who always give each other shit and talk shit about each other. You know, it is really the family element that's happened over these years. And it started off with the film. It started off with them giving us boot camp before we ever got in front of the camera, so we can get to know each other enough so that when we are on set and we started, like there are times when you can go off script, you can start just improvising. And Jim would give you a certain amount of leverage to just go off script and do what you want to do. But if it didn't work, he'd let you know. Get back to the script. But we knew each other enough where we could actually, at that breakfast scene, when we get out of the hyperstate chambers, and we go to breakfast, that scene with the knife and all that, most of it was written, but there were really choice moments that were just improv on the spot, and someone would reply, and if it worked, James would keep it in, and we would keep it in, and I think it helped make that scene so real because it was us.
Hey, I've read stories a lot of times about after the films wrap up that sometimes the cast gets to take like props home and things like that were used in the film. I just wondered if any of you were lucky enough to do that, and subsequently, if any of you managed to take home a pulse rifle and want to part with that, come pick me up after the show and I'll mortgage my house and get your top dollar for it.
Well, I have the saddest story of all. I was given my vest, my hat, my gloves, my bones, the bus that they made the death appliance on. And this is a life lesson. Divorce will lose you all of that. Yeah, so.
Rico has a sad story about that too.
But in truth, none of us.
Hey, don't tell that story because they just got married this weekend.
That's right, they got married, yes.
You guys been planning over the whole
Do not tell that story to them. Don't listen to a word he said.
Rico, you have fun. Yeah, you have a fun story.
Story about what you kept from the movie, right?
I'm sorry?
You have a sad story about what you kept from the movie?
Oh yeah, that's sad. It was a few years after the movie had finished, and a fan had written me a letter asking for a signature, and the letter said that we're going to go to school dressed as the alien characters, and I'm going as Frost. So I gave her a photograph signed, and I thought she's going as Frost. I took my dog tag and I put it in the bag. I thought she's gonna kill him with this. And so that's what my dog did. That's the only thing I took. I took my little dog tag and the script. But yeah, I gave that away to a friend.
Right after Rico told us that story, I read an article in the paper about somebody who sold some minute thing from a movie for like $1 million, and I didn't send it to you, Rico.
But understand, back when we did the film, keeping all your stuff, and it wasn't even the thing. It wasn't even our consciousness.
Merchandise.
Well, I asked for things. So I was like, can I have Casey? Can I have I would ask if I could have things, and James Cameron would always say, no, we might need that again. No, we might need that. And I was so sad. So, you know when they find me in my nest, and I pulled out, they pull out like the picture I got the second grade citizenship award. The dress I'm wearing in there, I was allowed to keep. So I was like, okay, cool. And I have, I think, just about every call sheet that I ever had, and I have 2 scripts, one that I signed then, and then one that I signed now. So I told my children, you wait till I die, and then wait a little bit, and then sell it.
You have to be very lucky these days to get souvenirs from film, because everything is audited as a property. On AVP, I asked Tom Woodruff Jr. if I could take a souvenir. And I said, look, I know you've got lots of these daggers that go around this elaborate dagger that we brought on his shin. And I said, I've got lots of these, would you mind if I took them home as a souvenir? And he said, we'd love to present you one as a souvenir. We really would. But they've all been stolen. We've got one left. That's what we have to finish the film with.
I had someone, I did a film called Caruso. Aiden Quinn was the star in it. And we went to Africa to shoot this film. And I played an African warrior who was being sacrificed to the gods. So basically they had me look like I'm the badass, and then cut my head off. And they put the plaster and they made the bust of my head, and then afterwards, you know, they would cut, they would stop filming, and then they would drop his head, and then put blood all around it. And it was amazing. It was so realistic looking that after the film was over with, they asked if I would like to have it. And I said, oh hell no. I mean, when you see yourself dead, you see yourself dead, it's a creepy ass thing.
I wanted to go back one day, thing of this fondest memory. I'll speak as an actor now. It's always the deepest fondness or passion an actor can have is to be proud of the work that they're doing. And to be proud of that, you have to admire all the other work that's going on around you, and the coherence and joy of being in a group of people doing their best on, you know, best script, best crew, best actors, best lighting, best this. It's like being on an Olympic team. That I'm most proud of, and in a way as an actor, I'm fondest that we've done this together and made this work of art. Let's say.
Did you plan on being a character actor prior to ending your basketball?
No, and I still have no plan.
Also, I know that all of you are iconic in this movie, just fabulous. Do you have a role that is your favorite, or is this one your favorite?
That's easy for me. It was this one.
I was going to say the same thing, it was kind of easy.
I think my favorite role was a role I played in this TV series called with
You were in it.
Adrian
Highlander?
Highlander. That's it, Highlander. I played the role of Highlander. Thank you for that. And the director flew me over, and me and the lead, Adrian, he played the Highlander. We had modeled together years earlier, and I was modeling, and I was living in England and modeling, and I would come here, I would come to LA for the pilot season. And so we ended up our last show, we would go all around Europe, and our last fashion show would end up here in Vegas. And then I had told Adrian, I said, I'm driving to LA, I'm going to be there for the pilot season. He goes, can I come? So he goes with me. And while we're there, we ended up going skiing. And on the way back from skiing, he fell in love with California and said, I want to stay here and I want to work as an actor here. I said, do it, man. 2 years later, he was on a TV series, and then a number of years after that, he was the Highlander.
I don't know, Vasquez was, I guess, my favorite.
What was your favorite, Mark? Favorite role? Did you ever play?
You know, it's hard to say, but to be honest, the character in Supernatural, Alistair, demon of all demons, dressed like a really shitty insurance salesman, but I was wicked.
Okay, I know we didn't get to everybody, but please visit them at their tables and ask your questions. I got one more wrap-up for you guys. I would love to know something that happened on a set, any set, that taught you something important.
I'll start this one. I think some of you have heard this story, but during the making of Aliens, we were working long hours and the budget was tight, and I think some of the crew thought they weren't getting paid the right overdrive or overtime fee. And I think a few people got fired for talking about it. And Sigourney heard about this, and she had a conversation, and I think that they came to some type of understanding where moving forward, they would pay them their double time for overtime, and they would hire some of the people they had fired. And it was Sigourney's speaking up for the crew, the star of the show. And I'm looking at this from a young actor's point of view, and you see how the star has a certain amount of leverage and how to use it, and that it wasn't used for herself, it was used for the better good of everybody. And when that crew came back to work, they put their heart and soul into their work. And I think that's one of the things that makes this film special, because it is a team effort. And we do our part, lighting does their part, makeup does their part, and the crew does their part. And when everybody's doing their best, as Bill said, I think often good things happen. But for me, it was just watching how she managed to change the situation, not with force or anger, but just having that conversation and doing the right thing. So that was a big lesson for me. Follow that shit.
Yours would be really interesting because you didn't continue in acting. But did you learn anything that taught you anything in life?
I think probably I didn't learn the lessons at the time, but some of them kind of looking back. But definitely, like at the time, there was, again, no offense to anybody, but like the girls, we were pretty awesome. And as a kid, like I kicked booty. And I would say Vasquez obviously was pretty awesome, and Sigourney. And for me, it was kind of like, wow, girls, we can kind of do whatever we want to do. I'm gonna channel my inner Spice Girls, but I feel like we were like the first like girl power. You know what I mean? Like I felt like that really kind of resonated with me, and I always knew that I could do whatever I wanted to do. I was lucky my parents were amazing and always were like, whatever you want to do, we'll support you. But like I wasn't scared to be in a movie. I wasn't scared to, do whatever it was that I was doing, because I knew that, anything boys can do, girls can do that.
I learned how to get things done through a devious way because we had a masseuse on set because we were pretty beat up, and especially Sigourney. She's 6 feet tall. She's running around up and down ramps carrying a 9-year-old child, and she was getting back problems. And after they finally, like way deep into the schedule, they finally made her a fake girl to carry around that was lighter weight. But I knew she had back problems, and we all took advantage of the masseuse when we could. And I heard an assistant say that they were going to let the masseuse go for budget reasons. So I sneaked up to Sigourney's assistant and I dropped a dime. And lo and behold, we got the masseuse. But if I had said anything about it myself,
Okay, so life lessons.
Don't give away your
When
props.
it's saying in film, like you never want to act with children or animals, right? Well, we have something to add to that. Don't act with guns. Because Jeanette and I, that are strapped to you with duct tape, and that Jim Cameron, Almighty General, refused to let you, dismantle the gun in order to, so you could run around like Bill Paxton, Bill Hope, and Rico Ross, and having a great time. But the one thing it did is it cemented a really good friendship.
Yeah, it did. And we also learned that bassoons, who was there, and we were the ones who needed it most, never ever got a massage. So you learn that sometimes those who need it the most don't get it.
Attached to the hip.
Your friends, yes.
I would say one thing I learned, it is an Aliens thing, is, as I say, it was my first job, so I was freaking out. And the moment I stepped onto the set, Sigourney came up to me privately and said, "Hi, I'm Sigourney Weaver, and I'm so happy to have you in our cast." And I thought from that moment, I really learned a lot from that, because I went, from now on, I'm doing, if I'm in a bigger position, I'm going to do that to every damn actor that comes in. And that was such a generous moment, and I also thought in my head, you should do that, and you did. So it's very impressive, and it seemed genuine as well. So I think that probably helped the world of the movie set a lot, that kind of attitude from her.
Amazing. Thank you guys, everyone give it up.
You guys have to know that the applause you gave us coming in today was the most we've ever had.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys ready? A little bit? All right, ready? All right, good. Beautiful closer. Make sure you get everyone's head. Yeah? Okay, everybody. Okay, thank you. You guys don't go anywhere, don't go anywhere. Ready? 1, 2. Thank you.
Yeah.